hold them to an hour. That's not going to work today. We're going to run a little over an hour. But if you can't stay for the whole thing, leave now and come back for the end. Because the end is the part you don't want to miss. All right, I want to thank all of you for being here. I'm humbled by your presence and really appreciate it. If you've been here before, I appreciate that. And if we do this again, I hope this will make you come back. I'd like to thank the Monroe Museum and the Historical Society of Walton County for for hosting today's event. And as I mentioned, we got books and videos in the back. If you would check those out, all that money will go to those two organizations. And I'd like to point out the museum's open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 10 to 4, and the David Sedgwick's house is open this summer on Saturdays from 10 to 4?
10 to
10 to 2.
First and third Saturday.
The first and third Saturdays, so y'all check that out. I'd like to thank Jim and Charlie Brown, Edward Jones Advisors, for being here, not for being here, but for sponsoring this event, making it all possible. And I'd like to thank the First Baptist Church for letting us use this facility. And since we're talking about the First Baptist Church, that's where we'll start. If you've been to a program before, you probably remember seeing this picture. This is the First Baptist Church. This picture, the First Baptist Church, is actually sitting where the First Methodist Church is today. And it's there because the Baptists are going to build a new church where we are right now. And so they moved the old one out of the way to make room for the new one. Now, I have mentioned before about the church, about when the church was built in the late 1820s, but I ran across something in Ms. Sam's research that I had to make you aware of, and that is the First Baptist Church, this building had 4 columns on the front of it. And Ms. Sams interviewed Mrs. P.D. Pollock. When this church was moved to this location, they made a school out of it. Ms. Pollock went to school there. And she said that these columns off the church were saved and put on the Coleman Mobley house when it was built, or when it was built on that same lot. They tore the church down. Coleman Mobley built a house there. And those 4 columns on that house are the 4 columns that were on the church. And then, when the Coleman Mobley house was torn down in 1950 to make way for the new Methodist church, those columns were shortened a bit and put on Gary Bradley's house in Gratis. So I've told Gary before that the columns on his house are about 100 years old, but it turns out they may be closer to 200 years old. That is Ms. Pollock's story, and I don't know that it's absolutely true, but it makes a good story anyway. I'd like to take a moment and recognize and speak just a word about this lady right here who was phenomenal. If you don't own a copy of Wayfarers in Walton, you should be ashamed. And if you own one and you hadn't read at least the narrative part of it, you should be ashamed. The research that this lady did is unbelievable. And if I want to read a newspaper that was printed in 1823, it takes me about 3 clicks to get to that newspaper. If she wanted to do that, she had to get in the car and drive to Atlanta to the archives. And she spent years and years doing that to make sure that we have the best county history in Georgia and possibly in the nation. So please do her the honor and yourself the honor of reading that book. I'd also like to recognize this young man, Larry Witcher, the professor in my book of not so useless knowledge. Now, he calls himself professor of useless knowledge. If it was not for Larry Witcher crawling around under Mr. Carnes' house, I couldn't put these programs on. But Larry shares. He's modest too. Larry shares everything he's got with us, and it's not just the photographs. It's a lot of knowledge. He's taught me a lot about Monroe and things to look for, and I enjoy sharing that with you. So with that said, let's talk about the first City Hall. This is a repeat too, because we talked about this before. I've told you that this building at the corner of Spring Street and Wayne Street was Monroe's first City Hall, and it was built about 1909, maybe a year or two before that. Well, that's not true. I lied. If you think about it, what about before 1909? I mean, Monroe was founded in 1821. What did they do the first 90 years for a City Hall? That never crossed my mind until a few months ago. I spend a lot of time looking at Sanborn fire maps. They're intriguing, they're fascinating to me. And in looking at this one, which is dated 1901, just to give you some, here's the courthouse right here, Broad Street, going here and Spring Street here. But there was a point on this one that caught my attention, and it's this little square right here. And I know that's hard to read because of the zooming in, but this says Lockup and Town Hall. So in 1901, this was the City Hall. Now this building is not on the 1895 map, so I don't know whether they moved it there from somewhere else or they had a different one or what, but it is on the 1901 map. Now, where would that be located? Well, if this is a courthouse, you cross Broad Street, go down this alley beside what's now the police department, and it's right across Wayne Street. In 1901, Wayne Street was a north-south alley. But where it is right here, where Gwinnett used appliances is today. And so that was the City Hall. But was it the first? Because even if it was there in 1901, Monroe was founded in 1821. So I'm not going to say it's the first City Hall. I'm going to say it's an early City Hall. We may come up with another one with a little more research. But what did it look like? Well, here's a picture that I made from the top of the courthouse a couple of years ago. And if we look at that same picture, hopefully that if my technology works. If not, we'll just go here. Look at that same picture that Mr. Carnes made about 100 years ago. And we again go across the street and down the alley, we find this building right here. And that was our City Hall in 1901. It was 2 stories. Upstairs we had the City Council and the Mayor's office. Hal Nowell was the mayor at that time. Downstairs you got little I don't know, peepholes, air holes, and this was a jail on the bottom. And this building over here is where they kept the owls. Okay, let's look at a couple other buildings around town that have lost face over the years. And this is the first one. These folks, can you tell where they're standing? Okay, well, let me see if I can show you. Oh, wait a minute. I just figured this. This is the first time I've used this program, so if it doesn't work, it's not my fault. Okay. There we go. Okay, they're right there on Spring Street, beside what is the extension agent's office today, and for years and years was the National Bank. This building right here, I think the Forestry Service is in there. This is the same building that was behind them in that other picture. They took the the second floor off the building, and they took about the first 10 to 15 feet off the front of it. But it's the same building as the one behind these folks right here. And it's a rather historical building, because somewhere up these steps right here, they got together and organized the Bank of Monroe, which became First National Bank. And today is Athens First. Now, why does this lady have an apron on? Well, if we turn around and look up the street in the other direction, we see her sitting in front of Jack's Soda Bar, which was in the side of the National Bank. Here's some other young ladies standing in front of Jack's. Well, about 1938, they remodeled the bank. This is interesting too. This is kind of a sidelight, but this is a drawing of not the whole remodel of the bank, But in the front wall of the bank, they put a time capsule. And it was right here, right between the Spring Street wall and the window. It was on that side. And time capsule was there until the bank was remodeled, I believe, in 1960. And then it was open. But they remodeled the bank. The Jack Soda Bar closed. Somewhere down the line, Mr. Dial came in possession of the soda bar and moved it around the corner right here. Changed the name to Soda Grill. It was a Monroe Soda Grill, and it stayed there until the bank remodeled again and took over both storefronts. And at that time, there was no more Soda Grill or Soda Bar. One more building to take a look at, and that's Carwood Manufacturing Company. If you've grown up here, I'm sure you remember that. My mother worked there for 42 years. But Carwood, this is a picture of the employees out in front of the building in 1940. And this is another picture of the building without the employees. And this is probably a little later. This is probably from late 40s, early 50s. But you may recognize Carwood Manufacturing looking more like this. It's a potluck cafe today in the strip mall, and they, in this case, took probably half the building off to make parking in front of that mall there. The potluck cafe, Herschel Scott used to have a little cafe down on this end of the building. Would be out of this picture, but that turned into the potluck cafe, and then when they redid the building, the potluck moved into these facilities right here. Also, if you look right here, you can see the railroad track in the middle of the street. Midland Avenue was named for the Gainesville Midland Railroad, and back, I guess, in the 40s and before, it was called Railroad Avenue or Railroad Street. All right, we've talked about this house before. This is A.C. Marshall's great-grandfather's house. A.C. is with us today, and I've talked with him about this, but this house was done away with to make room for the Monroe Hotel, which is that picture right there. And I never gave a lot of thought, figured they tore the house down, and built the hotel. Well, Larry Witcher gave me some pictures not too long ago of the construction of the post office, which is the Art Guild now. The post office was constructed in 1931. Here's a picture. They're working on the basement, and everybody's posing for the picture. That's the Monroe Hotel in the background. But if we zero in behind the hotel, there's Mr. Phillips' house. They slid it back, built the hotel in front of it, and it's on the Sanborn maps. It's marked as a hotel annex. And of course, today, Wells Fargo Bank sits in that position. We're going to switch gears a little now and talk about Mr. Boyd Buddy Conyers. Buddy was born in 1884, and as it says, there lived to 1966. He was born in Newton County. He moved to Monroe with his family when he was 4 years old. And Buddy held down a variety of jobs in his lifetime. Probably more than are listed here, but if you look through census records and other records, these are the ones that are listed that he held down. But to quote his wife, his passion was shoes. And he was the shoe shine man at J.C. Ash's barbershop for years and years. And I'm going to let J.C.'s lovely daughter Carol tell you about that. Wait a minute, we're going to stop this till I turn the speaker on. I apologize. Yeah. All right, I'm going to have to tell you about it. I can't get the sound to work. Buddy shined shoes at Jack's barbershop for years, and he had his own business in his house on North Broad Street where he not only shined shoes, but he also dyed shoes. And as Carol would tell you in this, that was a fashionable thing back then. Ladies liked to have their shoes dyed to match their dresses for weddings and proms and things like that. And here is an ad that Buddy put in the Tribune in 1953 advertising his business. He always called himself the old timer, by the way, in all the ads, but he tells us in 1953 that he had 58 years of experience, so he started with shoes when he was about 11 years old. And he also tells us that he could dye your eyes, and here's Easley Scalp. It was called Easley Scalp Pens because of Roderick Easley, who actually lived in Morgan County, but he kept his cows over on the Indian land at that time at cow pens, and so it got its name for him. He'd been doing that for 10 years by this time. But Easley Scalp Pens right here, well, about 3 miles northwest of Easley's Cow Pens, there was a little community called Spring Place, and it was right on Rogue Road. Now, Rogue Road was called Rogue Road because of a guy named John Murrell, who was a horse thief, and he transported his horses up and down this road and kept them hidden in a cane brake somewhere. But anyway, in 1820, the people in Spring Place, looking ahead, changed the name of their town to Walton Courthouse, figuring that someplace had to be the courthouse. It might as well be them. And then in 1820, the land lottery, which divvied up land that had been incorporated into Walton County, Habersham County, and a few other counties, Joshua Clark, who lived in Jones County, drew land lot number 65, which is basically the whole town of Monroe, or downtown as we know it today. And of course, none of these buildings were there then. It was just open land. There were a few log structures, houses and such there. But anyway, Joshua apparently didn't want to move from Jones County, so he sold that whole area to Elijah Betts for $400. Elijah Betts, being a civic-minded individual, turned around and gave 50 acres to the town of Walton Courthouse. And he gave those for public buildings, and so that part of it could be divided into city lots and resold to make money to build those buildings. And so Betts is also credited with naming the town Monroe. So Walton Courthouse changed names and was named after the 5th president, James Monroe. Now, soon after that, a courthouse was built where our historic courthouse is today. This is not it. But it may very well have looked like this. I'm using this just to give you something to look at, but it was a log structure and made, well, probably was 2 stories high, so that there would be a courtroom upstairs and offices downstairs. But something similar to that. And we know there was a courthouse there because there are articles in the paper that go back to 1820 and 21 where they were having sales at the court, sheriff's sales and other sales at the courthouse. So we know there was something there for them to have a sale on the steps of. But anyway, in 1821, the county commissioners listed here asked for bids to build a courthouse. And in 1823, the first brick courthouse was built up here in the courthouse square where the historic courthouse is now. That courthouse did fine for about 23 more years, and then they built a second brick courthouse. Now, we don't have a clue what this first one looked like, but we know exactly what the second brick courthouse looked like. All you have to do is go up to the courthouse that's there now, open up the cornerstone, and this gentleman put a set of plans in the cornerstone for that second courthouse. And you can see what that looked like. Judge Thomas Giles, who lived from 1839 to 1917, lived in this house, which is right across the street over here. It didn't look like this when he lived there. It was a much less palatial house. It didn't have the columns and wraparound porch. It was just a simple 2-story house. Anita Sounds calls Judge Giles one of Walton County's most loyal citizens. And she said that for a number of reasons. For instance, he gave 100 acres and $5,000 to help start the A&M school at Walker Park. He set up an educational fund that funded, I don't know how many kids going to college. I don't know where that stands or even if it exists anymore, but Ms. Sams wrote that they had given away over $50,000 by the 60s from that educational fund. Well, Judge Giles was the ordinary of Walton County from 1872 to 1889. Being ordinary means you have ordinary power to enforce the law. So Judge Giles decided we needed a new courthouse, and he put together, appointed a building committee to accept bids in 1882 to build that courthouse. And when it was all over, this is kind of similar or close to what we had. Actually, we had a little more than this. But James Smith, a contractor from Sparta, won the bid at $21,095, and Bruce and Morgan Atlanta Architects designed the courthouse. Now, on the building committee was Mr. Samuel Broadnax, who lived in this house in Walnut Grove. The house is still there. And Bruce and Morgan also designed his house, and you may notice some of the features in his house replicate some of the features in the courthouse. And so on November 1882, work began, and Miss Fanny Bush laid the first 12 bricks, one brick for each voting district in Walton County. I don't know who Miss Fanny Bush was, and I don't know why she was laying the bricks. Maybe she's a good bricklayer right now. But anyway, that's what the people that know say. And work continued, and on the 10th of May, 1884, the courthouse was accepted at a final cost of $23,865.88. They saved a little money by substituting wooden steps for the concrete steps. And people always accused Judge Giles of being cheap. He was trying to get ready to build this courthouse, and they had a rainy winter and washed away almost every bridge in Walton County, and he wouldn't replace them because he was saving money to build a courthouse. And you may have heard that this courthouse was built without incurring any debt, and that's not altogether true. When it was all over, there was about $5,000 that they borrowed from Stephen Felker, but it was paid back in short order, and the courthouse was in place. And this is more or less what it looked like. Actually, this is less than what it looked like. I found this drawing in Ms. Sam's research, and it comes to light that our courthouse actually had a dome on top of it. And she mentions that in Wayfarers in Walton, and this is her drawing of that dome. And she saw a picture that a lady in Statesboro, Georgia had in a newspaper. Now, that sounds like a weird connection, but the lady in Statesboro was from the Nunley family and did have ties in Monroe, and she had a scrapbook with this picture in it. And Ms. Sams made this pencil drawing of what the courthouse dome would have looked like. We don't have an actual picture of the courthouse with the dome on it, but if we did, it might look like this. Actually, it would look a lot like that. That's the courthouse in Monroe, North Carolina. This is a modern picture of the Union County Courthouse that's in Monroe, North Carolina. And at the time it was built, it was almost brick for brick, exactly like the courthouse that sits on our courthouse square. I've studied these pictures, and of course the dome's gone from ours, but other than that, the only two things that I can find that are different is the Union County Courthouse has a little window in this gable, and their porch is not as big as ours. But the brickwork, the masonry, and the trim, everything else, I can't find any differences at all. So what happened to our dome? Why don't we still have a dome? Well, this article from 1890 tells us that Judge Cook had a contractor to examine the dome because they thought it was unstable, and sure enough it was. There had been leaks in the roof, and some of the timbers were rotten, and they were afraid that it was going to fall, and so there were plans to take that down as soon as the weather permitted. Now, in Wayfarers in Walton, Ms. Sam says that the dome was blown down by the wind. And not in Wayfarers, but in her research, she quotes George Cox and Paul Burson as telling her that. Now, I don't know if they knew what they were talking about or not, but I will say this. We know there were plans to take it down. It possibly could have gotten blown down before it was taken down. I don't know, but you know the facts. You can make your own decision. Just a couple other pictures. This picture of the courthouse during an ice storm, and this was before 1910. How do you know that? There's no clock. The clock was put in 1910. Larry Witcher told me that. These guys are in the city park, which was behind the courthouse, back there where the Chamber of Commerce building and that gazebo is today. And I guess they're going to have a party. If you look close, they've got their Bluetooth device with them here. Provide music. Here's another group meeting on the front lawn of the courthouse. This is Sheriff Arnold that we talked about in regard to Buddy Conyers. By this time, he was ordinary. He was no longer sheriff. This gentleman right here has got on the badge. He must be the sheriff this time. Now, this picture, I'm not so sure about. This looks like an old sloppy attempt at photoshopping, but it makes a good picture anyway. This is what the courthouse looked in the 1930s, early 30s. Pretty good sized oak trees. The oak trees were planted in 1910. There were cedar trees there before then, and there was an argument on whether to take the cedars down and put oaks up, but they finally did that. And here's the eventual 1947 class of Monroe High School having their first grade picture made behind the courthouse. Wonder why they were behind the courthouse. Well, it comes to pass that in 1936, 1 year before this, the high school burned down on Bow Springs Avenue. And so they decided the high school students needed to be in a building where they could change classes, so they moved them to the Church Street Grammar School, and they took all the grammar school kids, put some of them in the Methodist church, some of them in this church, and this class met in the grand jury room in the courthouse and stepped out back to have their picture made. Actually, we have an illustrious member of this class, Harry Brown, standing right there, is with us today. Harry gave me this picture. And Hoyt Studdard was in this class, but he was laying out this day to get his picture made. In the 40s, behind the courthouse was a parking lot. And this is a nice snow scene in the 60s. The 60s brought something else about. A grand jury said we needed a new courthouse, and the Chamber of Commerce said, well, good, let's tear that one down and put up a parking lot. Well, the problem they ran into when they said that was they made the women mad. And every women's club in town, the garden club, the literary club, the women's clubs, got upset and started writing letters. And so that gladly never came to pass, and we held on to our courthouse. It's a good thing, because if you go to the concerts on Friday night, or you go to the farmer's market on Saturday morning, how would you like to see this every time we went up there? Because they had plans to put up a parking deck, not just a lot. We held on to the courthouse, and in 1996 it was restored to its former glory. The acoustic ceilings were taken out, the cheap paneling was removed, the carpet and the beautiful hardwood floors were restored, and we're proud that that building is actually coming into more and more use again. And that's good, because it's not good for a building to stand empty. And we're going to move now to the Monroe Girls Corps, which we talked about before, but today we're going to talk about how it got its start. And that begins with VFW Post 4421, which was the largest VFW post in the state of Georgia, by the way. And this is what it looked like, sat on the hill next to where Captain D's is now. And in 1950, they put an article in the Tribune outlining some of the things that the American Legion, the VFW Post had accomplished in 1950, and you can read over that list yourself. They bought a resuscitator for the hospital that saved the child's life 3 days after they bought it. They built and furnished a roadside park that a lot of you probably had picnics in. They sponsored the Girls Corps, of course. They provided hot lunches for every child in Walton County that couldn't afford one. They spent over $400 in relief to veterans. They fed Thanksgiving dinner to 80 kids and their families, some of which had never tasted turkey. The 2 buses they maintained for the Girls Corps were also used for the Boys and Girl Scouts, for the 4-H club, for different athletic teams, and the list goes on and on. Well, you say, well, how was all of that accomplished? Well, I'm going to show you how it was accomplished, but you need to look quick because we're in the Baptist church. Right here, under this awning. Harrods of Monroe. You had a town full of veterans that had been back from service maybe 5 years, and there was slot machines and adult beverages available. And so the money was coming in, and in all fairness, a good bit of it was going out to worthwhile things. This gentleman, Kelso Hearn, who happens to be my father-in-law, was the commander of the VFW post along this time, and he was also quartermaster for the whole state of Georgia. Now, this is getting into how the Girls Corps got its start. Kelso went to Atlanta to the state VFW convention, and he saw an all-girls drum and bugle corps in the parade. We don't know that it was the Bon Bon Girls from Audubon, New Jersey, but they were one of the more popular girls' corps at that period of time, which would have been in the late 40s. And so it possibly could have been them that he saw. Well, as fate would have it, Kelso was standing in front of the Cable Piano Company when he was watching the parade. And he has this great idea, this would be a wonderful thing for Monroe, and the VFW could sponsor this. A lot of corps were sponsored by VFWs, by American Legions, and drum and bugle corps were very popular in the Northeast, in the Midwest, even into Canada, but there were very few in the South. It was just not a popular thing in the South. So Kelso goes into the Cable Piano Company and tells them his idea and said, do you have anybody, or do you know of anybody who might help me out with what I'm trying to do here? Well, again, as fate would have it, a young man named Wayne Shields was a drum instructor giving lessons at the Cable Piano Company. And so they gave Kelso his card, and Kelso made contact with him, and Shields wrote back not long after that, and in essence said, I would appreciate the opportunity of being of assistance to you in your endeavor. I believe your corps could be whipped into shape, and I'm sure the Girls Corps members in here would relate to that comment. But he goes on to say, I do not teach bugles. Any line sergeant could teach drilling. So what did Wayne Shields do? Well, he had his own orchestra, and he was playing, as this advertisement shows you right here, he was playing at the Biltmore Terrace every Thursday night, Latin American dance music. And when it came to drumming, Wayne knew about all there was to know about drumming. He was a good drummer. He knew what to do. But when it came to bugles and it came to drilling, he was totally in the dark. But as he had pointed out, we had a town full of soldiers who had been drilling for 5 years, who came to town, and luckily 2 of those gentlemen, Dupree Hendricks and Luke Kirkley, agreed to help teach not only the girls, but Shields too, how to drill, how to march. Watt McDonald came on board to teach bugle, and so we had the instructors in place. Shields said, we need a drum major. So Kelso took Wayne over to Flonnie Pollock's house, and as Flonnie tells the story, Wayne beat out a rhythm on the hood of the car and asked her to duplicate it. And when she did, he said, you're hired. So on January the 10th, 1949, the Monroe Girls Corps was born. Is anybody here in that picture? Yeah, I expect you are. I expect there's several people here that are in that picture. You'll notice that there are majorettes. The majorettes didn't last long, maybe a year, and Shields decided they were taking too much of the glory away from the people that were making music, doing the work, and so the majorettes went by the wayside. The Corps made its first big trip to Brunswick, Georgia in 1949 to play in the state VFW parade and convention. They stayed at the Palatial Shady Rest Hotel in Court. And Carol Holbrook tells me they went deep sea fishing. They played their first football halftime show in when Monroe unfortunately lost to Greensboro in September 1949. But it wasn't long that they spread their wings, they got on the bus and drove to Chicago in 1950 for the VFW National Convention and Parade there. And now I'm going to show you a short video clip that we just came into possession of. Charles Sanders gave us this, and it dates to 1951. Fliney was still the drum major. It's a very short clip and it's not focused well, but as we speak, the University of Georgia, Walter J. Brown Media Archives, has this film in their possession, and hopefully when we get it back it will be clearer than this. But it's a fantastic little piece of film because of its historical value. That's on North Broad. Charles's mother or father, whoever was making the movie, is standing in what's today the City Hall parking lot. At that time, they were still wearing the nurse-style cape and uniform. When Fliney graduated in 1952, Barbara Smith became the drum major, and during Barbara's tenure as drum major, the drum major's uniform changed from a majorette-style uniform to a more military-style uniform. The Corps went to the Lions Convention in Chicago in '53 and took home their first award. They were awarded second place. Here's a couple of pages out of Judy Brown Shuford's scrapbook telling us some of the things that she did on that trip. For instance, we can read right here that she stayed in room 304 at the Atlantic Hotel. They took second place. This is the head of the Georgia Lions Club who came to Monroe to present Mr. Shields and Barbara Smith with a $200 check for winning second place. Well, why didn't they win first place? Well, part of it was the uniforms. The judges just weren't impressed with those uniforms that they had. And the other part was a little home cooking, because a Chicago unit took first place. The Corps went on to help start the Monroe Christmas Parade. The Corps had marched in dozens of Christmas parades, and Monroe didn't have one. So Mr. Shields got together with some other civic leaders and businessmen, and in 1953, Monroe had its first Christmas parade. In 1954, they went to Philadelphia and marched in the VFW convention parade there, and this was their first appearance in their new purple uniforms, probably the ones that most people remember them in. They wore those uniforms longer than any of the others. 1956, they made their first appearance in the Macy's parade. They would go on to appear there 8 times. In 1957, they drove to Mississippi for the Mississippi Dairy Festival, where they marched a 4-mile parade course in 100-degree temperature. Won't make that trip again. Same year, they went to Miami, the VFW parade. In 1959, they won the Lions International Championship in New York City. And later that year, they made their second appearance in the Macy's parade. And if I can get my speaker to work. This is a short clip of the 4 videos that we have of their appearance in the Macy's parade. you're going to be able to see it. Whether you can hear it or not remains to be seen. Lauren Green and Betty White.
16 years ago, won dozens of state and national awards.
Lord, in the proven instead of making the cheesecake pictures, they built the cheesecake pictures.
Oh, Betty. Now, you might say these girls have become known as Georgia's
Girls Call from Monroe, Georgia. A unique team of 41 lovely young ladies in the 6th through the 12th grades. They performed all over the country. They have a trophy case full of prizes and awards for marching and musical excellence. Last year, they gave a concert at Carnegie Hall here in New York. Now, Betty Hope, Georgia Beach has rehearsed the routine all year long, even during the summer months. And all that practice will save. There they go.
Okay, as Lauren told you or mentioned, the girls' corps did appear at Carnegie Hall in 1965, an evening with the corps. I think there were 3 other groups there with them that night. And I want to go back to 1954 to the Philadelphia Convention and talk a little about this young lady right here. Her name is Joanne Peters. And you can say, well, that's not Joanne Peters, that's Joan Peters. Well, as Joanne told me, her mother couldn't spell, but this is Joanne Peters. And Joanne, while they were in Philadelphia, was entered by Mr. Shields in the solo drumming championship. And Shields wrote a piece for her to play in the championship. And she was entered in the junior division. There were 2 divisions, and she was in the junior division because of her age. And in this competition, she'd stand in front of the judge's table and play the solo that Mr. Shields had written for her. And after she finished that, she had won. And she became, as far as I know, Monroe's only national champion, and remains so. Joanne's winning score was 79.5. There were 18 entries in the junior division. She was the only girl. She was the only girl in either division. And if she had been in the senior division, she still would have finished second. So out of the senior and junior division, there was only one guy that beat her, and he was in the other division. So as I said, she has been, as far as I know, she's the only national champion that Monroe has. Once she graduated, she became an accountant with Sears Roebuck. She married Donald Smith. They had 3 children, 1 granddaughter. She was here. You might have seen her in 2013. She was in the Christmas parade, but she didn't play then. And so, just for you today, here is Joanne Peters Smith, wife, mother, and grandmother. 62 years later, playing part of the solo that Mr. Shields wrote for, along with some street beats that you will probably recognize. And the solo is what she won the national championship. Joanne, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our program today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll visit our sales table back here and have some more refreshments, and come back next time.